everybody. I want to welcome you to our 14th NUPS webinar. Today, we speak about emerging PhD research, so interdisciplinary migration research. And I want to welcome you, friends and colleagues of our NUPS network here all together. Our NUPS network is somehow a leftover of the International Metropolis Conference last year in Berlin, but we take this up and we have established this PhD group, and we are very proud of that group. And we had the pleasure to listen already once to 4 PhD students presenting their work, and we take up today. So I prepared a little slideshow for you. Excuse me. One second, please. Excuse me, it doesn't work as I want it to work. There we are. So our NUPS team is going to present that PhD work, and you see here our partners. We are going to speak about the research in the field of social policies, in the field of climate change and technological change. The dissertations are focusing on the policy dimension. Excuse me. Excuse me. Somebody's typing. Could you please close the microphones? Okay. Today we speak about the PhD research of 4 PhD students, which are part of our network, and we are very pleased to have them here. So each speaker will speak for 10 to 12 minutes, and we have then a question, answers, and discussion sessions. I want to introduce you to our speakers. Those are Helmia Adita Fitra. She did her master in Semarang, Indonesia, and is a junior lecturer at the Institute Technology Sumatera, and of SMUS, which is the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability at Humboldt University and TU Berlin also. So Helmia, good to have you here. And she will speak about her research on return migration into Lampung in Indonesia. We have then as a next speaker, Mr. Alex McLellan. He's at Carleton University in Canada. And there he is he does a PhD in public policy, I saw, at the School of Public Policy and Administration. And he's working on the role, how working benefits could contribute to the well-being of migrants also, as far as I saw that. So immigrants and the Canada Working Benefits Program. We have then as a third speaker, Minji Kim. She's at Technical University Berlin, and they're in the Department of Architecture. We welcome her as she's going to speak about Asian diaspora entrepreneurship, which is one strand of migration and integration, which is often not covered by social policies. So self-employment is a very special thing for us in Germany. And I welcome you, Kim, here. We have as the last speaker, Domenico Bovienzo. He's from University Ca' Foscari in Venice, Italy. And he's speaking about a storyline approach to 2 crises in African hotspot locations. He's a research member of the ERS Risk Assessment and Adaptation Strategies Center in Venice also. So I welcome you, and I'm pleased to give you the floor to the first speaker, which is Helmia. Please, Helmia, would you?
Thank you very much, Professor Felicitas Hilman. So let me share my screen. Okay.
Apologies that I was a bit stumbling before, but there was a lot of noises in my microphone.
Okay. So is my presentations visible?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much to Professor Felicitas Hillman and NOOBS teams for the opportunity. It's an honor for me to present here. And hello, everyone. Nice to have you here. My name is Helmia Adita Fitra, and I'm a PhD candidate at HU Berlin. So today I would like to present a small part of my PhD project with title Local Response to the Pandemic Return Migration in Lampung, Indonesia. So in this presentation, I would like to discuss 5 points. First is the rising migration in the time of COVID-19 pandemic. The second is a local response as one of essential keys in reintegration of returning migrants. And the third point is research designs of this study. And the next is the findings. And the last one is the implications. So the present study is inspired by the rising return migration during the COVID-19 pandemic. As we already know that migration trends during a pandemic seems to shift, especially in the developing countries, which are usually dominated by internal migration and rural to urban migration, already shifted to urban to rural migrations. And the rising phenomenon of return migration could be found in many various news portals, newspapers, social media, and other public display. And we know that during a pandemic, cities appears no longer as a migration destination because of the high number of COVID-19 cases and the collapse of urban sectors. And this situation has triggered many migrants to return to their place of origin. And based on the recent studies, migrants who return home in the pandemic time have some reasons, including economic problems that increased during the pandemic. Like, for example, they face the salary delays and layoffs. And also another reason is about the family reasons. For example, when they have a family in the village who is getting sick. And also another reason is a fear of the virus, such as psychosomatics or feeling or being afraid of decreased health quality. And another reason is the existence of regulations from the institutions that it's a popular known as a work from home, and this policy is provides opportunities to work from their place of origin. And the last one is anxiety due to the implementation of social distancing, isolation, and so on, that changes social interaction in a sudden way and drastically. So the phenomenon of return migration during this pandemic did not fail to attract the attention from migration scholars. Many of them have studied return migration during the pandemic, including studies on what is the characteristics of returning migrants and how migrants' coping mechanism in facing the pandemic, how the vulnerability and resilience of migrants during the pandemic, how the pandemic impacts the remittances. But compared to other studies, only a few discuss how the response of the local society in the place of origin in welcoming or in accepting back the return migrants in a pandemic situation. So before discussing why there is a need to study local responses to the return of migrants in pandemic situation, we need to know what response means. Sources state that response is a statement, either spoken or written, that is made to reply to a question or request or criticism or accusations. And response can also the way in which something is greeted or is welcomed, and response can also be interpreted as a result. So in the context of return migration, Casarino explains that local responses can indicate the likelihood of migrants to reintegrate into the local community after return. And Kushminder adds that there are 3 typologies of structural and cultural environments for return. The first typology is a favorable environment. This favorable environment is when the local population has an inclusive attitude towards returnees and is open to cultural diversity. The second typology is adverse environment. This environment is when the local population has an exclusive attitude towards returnees and close towards cultural diversity. And the last one is a natural environment. This natural environment is when the local population is ambivalent towards returnees. Thus, the study of local responses to return migration should be taken into account, because if there is no possibility for migrants to reintegrate into the local society, then it's possible that their return just will exacerbate or worsen the problems in the place of origin. And this study aims to investigate how the local society in Lampung Province, Indonesia, reacts to returning migrants in the light of COVID-19 pandemic. And to achieve the aims, there are two objectives. The first one is identify the level of agreement of respondents with the pandemic return migration. And the second is to identify the hidden response. It could be request, criticism, accusations, anything related about pandemic return migration. And this study takes Lampung Province, Indonesia as a study area, because Lampung is a province outside Java Island that contributes the largest number of migrants to Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia. And for your information, during the pandemic, Jakarta at that time was the epicenter of the pandemic because of the high population density. And this study has 165 respondents, which were collected from an online questionnaire. The questionnaire was open for around 2 months, from 10 August to 1st October 2021. And in this questionnaire, respondents were asked for their agreement level on several statements. As you can see on the slide, there are 5 statements. There are 5 statements, including if they welcome the return of migrants to their neighborhoods, if they believe that returning migrants will not transmit the virus, and so on. And the agreement level range from 1 as the lowest degree, illustrate their strong disagreement, to 5 as the highest degree, illustrating their strong agreement. And for this data, I use a descriptive statistic analysis to get the indications of local acceptance of returning migrants in a pandemic time. And another input for the analysis is data from an open-ended question, with the question, what is your opinion about return migration in Lampung during the pandemic time? And in this data, respondents were allowed to write anything about his or her opinion related to return migration. And for this data, I use MaxQDA to help me coding and doing thematic interpretative analysis. And this is the profile of respondents I got. It looks like from the gender distribution, the respondents is balanced, as well as the category of residents. But the age of respondents is dominated by those with age under 36 years old. So the respondents, I would say, are still relatively young and productive. And this is the findings. Based on the findings, as you can see on the slide, that locals' attitudes differ depending on the issues what are concerned. So in terms of health concerns, people in Lampung have an ambivalent attitude towards returnees, as well as for the economic issues. So people in Lampung tend to be hesitant in believing that the return of migrants will bring economic benefits, especially during the economic hardships caused by the pandemic. But overall, in general, people in Lampung show their openness to the returnees. They believe that the return of migrants will bring especially socio-cultural benefits, and they also agree that they will not have any issue in mingling with returnees in the future. So based on the result, it can be said that Lampung Province has inclusive environment for returnees and offers an opportunity to a successful reintegration. And the next is the second findings. This finding is based on respondents' opinion on return migration. We can identify the hidden response from the locals to pandemic return migration. So based on the answer to an open-ended question, there are 3 clusters of codes that has links to each other. The blue circle, or can be said to be cluster 1, consists of economic benefits and set up a new business or new opportunities. So based on this cluster 1, we can understand that new business setup or new opportunities is the most desired economic benefits for of return migration by the locals. And the second cluster is the group that I put the green circle. This cluster has codes related to sociocultural benefits, sharing ideas and knowledge, empowering locals, sharing migrants, experiencing, and so on. And also it has links with the neighbors and local residents. So based on this cluster too, we can understand that neighbors and local residents, or in this case of villagers in the migrants area of origin, are the ones who should get the socio-cultural benefits from the migrants' return in Lampung. And the last cluster is cluster 3 with the red circle. This cluster contains everything that is expected from local about the contribution that can be made from returnees. So the local expects that returnees could contribute something. For example, returnees can bring and share the ideas, support the small, medium enterprises, share their skill to the locals, and so on. So according to the findings, there are some implications of local response to pandemic return migration in Lampung province. From the findings, both the first finding or the second findings, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the province of Lampung tends to be open to the return of migrants. This is favorable as it gives returning migrants the chance to successfully reintegrate. And of course, in order to achieve a successful reintegration, a comprehensive reintegration which encompassing social, economic, and cultural programs should be implemented and designed to address the specific needs of returning migrants. Because if reintegration is successful, it will encourage returnees to settle back in Lampung and discourage them to from re-out migrating even after the pandemic has ended. And the next implication is related to economic sectors. The economic crisis caused by the pandemic has increased the local population expectation on returning migrants. Migrants are seen as a way out of the economic crisis, although the results indicate that some respondents are still hesitant or not sure about the economic benefits that returning migrants may bring, but opening new business that can lead to create new job opportunities or to create employment is the economic benefit that locals desire most from returning migrants in this crisis situation. So in this sense, productive consumption is more expected by the locals instead of non-productive consumption. And the last is, this is interesting, it's related to the health concern, because although the local government in Lampung have implemented the arrival procedure policies such as a mandatory COVID-19 testing prior to travel, mandatory reporting, social distancing, self-isolation, but it appears that the people of Lampung are still hesitant to express confidence that migrants will not transmit the virus. So this implies that the pandemic has given rise to a sense of territory. For example, the emergence of local lockdowns in some villages or even in the neighborhoods level showed that during the pandemic, community ties are no longer bound by ethnicity, religion, race, or something like that, but instead of they are spatially and territorially bound. And this is interesting and needs further study. So I think that was my presentation and I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Helmia. You're perfectly in time and I enjoyed very much your presentation. Thank you so much. And we have a chance to discuss later on. I want to give the floor first to the speakers and then we do the discussions. The next one is Alex McLellan, and I kindly ask you to share your presentation with us. Thanks. We can see that. Perfect.
Excellent. All right. Well, it's nice to see all of you, and I hope I get to see as many of you as possible when Metropolis is in March in Ottawa, where I live. So today I'm talking about one of the 3 papers that I'm including in my dissertation. So I see being able to claim social benefits as part of the story for integration. Integration's a complex idea. I think that's safe to say. And some people, when they migrate to a new country, are able to support themselves strictly through work or through investments or whatever else they may have, but it doesn't go that way for everyone. Having a robust social safety net is an important part of allowing people to make ends meet. So what does that look like for immigrants to Canada? And what's something, and I'm going to talk about a major effort the government of Canada's made to try to make that better. So just a little bit of background detail there. So the welfare law, what is that? So the Canada Workers Benefit was established out of concern that because of the widening income inequality in the West, which includes Canada, of course, that in some situations it may be more profitable for some people to claim social assistance, which we call it that here when those are the benefits you get when you're not working or not able to work and you're of a working age. So the Canada Workers Benefit, it's essentially it's an income supplement for people who are working. So the idea is we want to make, for lower income people, we want to try to make it more rewarding for them to work. The idea being that when someone's working, when someone's working who can work or who wants to work, it's better for the person because they have the dignity of doing something for themselves. And it's better for the social benefits in Canada because work has higher value in terms of taxes. So that's why this was originally established. And what do we get out of it? So these amounts, Felicitas, you were telling me about Ottawa's expensive. Well, Canada's gotten pretty expensive, so in general. So these amounts, frankly, are not all that generous. So if you're a single person earning $32,000 a year in Canada, which is about 25,000 euros a year, in Ottawa, the city where I live, you would struggle to rent a room. Renting an apartment of your own is out of the question. So at that point, you're earning too much to get this benefit. And $1,395 a year, that would maybe pay for the hydro bill in a small apartment. So I'm looking at mainly low-income recent immigrant workers to Canada for this. So they have an access gap, and that's the focus of this paper, how well we've been helping with that access gap. So the Canada Workers Benefit is accessed through taxes. So if you're not filing taxes, you're not able to get the Canada Workers Benefit or many other benefits, such as maybe some of you have heard of the Canada Child Benefit. You wouldn't be able to get that if you're not filing taxes. So there's a chunk of people there who are missing out. And what's happening there? Well, why are they missing out? Well, probably a lot of it is the classic, you're in a new country and you need to learn that new country's systems. I think if I was to move to Germany or the United States, I would probably have some time to learn what paperwork I need to file, what I need to do to access certain things. These things just take time in general. But of course, the other issue is in Canada, for the federal government, our two official languages are English and French. So many people who immigrate to Canada do not speak English or French. You probably heard about the Syrian refugees we let in. 97% of them don't speak any English or French. So, I mean, I'm talking about this 83.1% in the aggregate, but really the story goes way, way, way beyond that. There are a lot of differences by whether you're a refugee or economic immigrant to Canada. There are differences by male or female. There's a lot happening there. So in 2018, we started to do more about this. So the Canada Workers Benefit has always been accessed through the tax system. But in 2018, they announced that it was going to be automatic through anyone who files taxes and who is eligible, they get the benefit. So the question, of course, is how much of the access gap is this making up for? So there are two key questions I'm after here. So there are two basic areas I'm interested in. So number one, how much more access is this giving people in terms of, is this helping them access the benefit a lot more or a little more? Or I'm assuming it must be more. I'm assuming it's not chasing people away, but I do have to test that before I make assumptions. And the second big area is, how much of an impact is this having on people who want to work and can work joining the workforce? So my concern basically is, if we're not doing enough to give access to low-income recent immigrants to Canada, is this causing them to leave the workforce at a high rate and claim social assistance? We don't know. I haven't tested the data on that yet, but I'm going to leave that question for now. So I'm using a research design that's very common in economic statistics. It's called differences in differences, in case any of you haven't heard of it. The basic idea here is it's mimicking the classic control study design common in clinical psychology, and we use it in a lot of other areas now too, except I'm using secondary data, I'm not using primary data. So the idea is, you can see from the equation I've set up there, the idea is to look at the difference between your control group and your treatment group before the treatment is applied, look at that difference after your treatment is applied. So look at, and then see what is the difference of those two differences. So that's why it's called differences in differences. So that will show you, so designing the control group is complicated because they have to be, the control group has to match closely the treatment group, because you want to be able to say the treatment is truly the difference. So this will show us, so I'm going to apply this to the question of access. So how many more people are claiming? I'm going to apply it to the question of work. So are more people working? So those would be, I'm going to apply this equation twice, and access and work would be the two treatment effects in a sense. And so what I said about the access being quite different for different populations of immigrants, well, I'm going to look at that question too. So what the equation I just showed is really only the outset, the highest level. There's a lot more to look at though. So I'm going to look at, how do refugees compare to economic ones? How do men compare to women? In region of Canada, that's very important because Canada's really, really big. And we have a very diverse economy. So some parts of our economy are more volatile than others. Some parts of Canada are very far from urban centers. So region is usually an important thing to look at in Canada. So I would likely look at that. And the story doesn't stop at what I've displayed here. I'm going to let the data be my guide, essentially. So that's all I have for now. I look forward to any questions. This is pretty preliminary, so I look forward to your help in shaping this up.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that presentation. I was somewhat expecting the first preliminary results, but we can speak about that in the discussion, maybe, what your impression is, what you get out of it. I want to ask the next speaker, that is Kim, to um, direct us through her PhD research. Kim, please.
Yes. Do you see the screen?
Perfectly. Perfectly.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see you all again. And today I would like to briefly talk about my thesis in general. If you remember, I focused last time more on one of my cases with geographical maps and photos. This time I wanted to show a whole overview of my research. My working title is Asian Diaspora Entrepreneurship, focusing on the emergence of Asian entrepreneurs and its impacts on spatial practices with case studies in Berlin's Kantstraße and Amsterdam's Chinatown. This presentation starts with the research context and the theoretical framework, which consists of 3 parts. At last, I talk about my research design and some selected results. My research context is from the 2 different sides of Asian migrants in Western countries. On one hand, especially in US and in UK, the media covered the conflicts of Chinatown with the city. During the urbanization process under the capitalist state, Asian migrants as ethnic minority have often been threatened by the new developments. On the other hand, on the right side, Asian businesses such as Asian food scene is growing with a trend in global cities. So my theoretical framework consists of 3 parts. And first, diversity and transnationalism concept. My research context is based on the global city concept. The global city term was coined by Saskia Sassen from Global City about how we can understand diversity. I approach with Stephen Bertowic's super diversity concept, especially on ethnic diversity and transnational context. Specifically, I'm focusing on the ethnic diversity in light of migration history. The diversity can be a result of immigration as people from all over the world come to these cities to live and work or as refugees. Regarding how this migrant shaped the space in the new city, this can be characterized by ethnically concentrated form as an ethnic enclave or dispersed throughout the city. To understand their space, I used Susan Hall's method in her migrant urbanisms and migrant infrastructure research. Within the urban ethnic neighborhood, looking at the ethnic economy, specifically ethnic entrepreneurship, is really meaningful. The research has covered in the field of entrepreneurship, sociology, and ethnic studies on how the successful and challenges criteria of ethnic businesses. In this regard, the spatial perspective, specifically focusing on Asian economy, has been under-researched. And thirdly, from the urban planning perspective, the ethnic enclave has been controversial on the tension between the new developments and the migrants causing gentrification. And the tension has been in urban area. The Asian enclave, such as Chinatown, has conflicted with the new development or revitalization project. And to serve the social justice in urban planning with ethnic diversity, understanding ethnic entrepreneurs as a new urban actors is needed. In a broad understanding, diversity as a resources, also Professor Heeman also suggested. And my research question is, how have the ethnic entrepreneurs as new urban actor affected the urban spatial transformation? For this question, I use grounded theory, which I carried out field research and literature review for a theoretical framework and back and forth. And I chose Berlin and Amsterdam for the comparative study. I limited the Asian to East and Southeast Asian who had the Chinese influence in the history. Under the main research question, I had 3 sub-questions and methods. With the first sub-question, I want to examine the historical evolution from the spatial perspective, mainly with the geographical mapping on a city and neighborhood scale based on the Asian migration history to Berlin and Amsterdam. Because it deals with the historical point of view, archival research and biographic work has been used a lot. For the second question, I investigated contemporary spatial practices by Asian entrepreneurs. I mainly used the field research result and mapping as well. During Corona period, I also traced social media and blogs of Asian entrepreneurs as my secondary material. And lastly, through understanding how the Asian entrepreneurs have been influenced from the urban policy and planning, I aim to analyze how the Asian entrepreneurs as a new urban actor has affected the urban planning and the urban policy discourse as well. Here, I mostly use the literature review method and urban actor mapping with urban policy analysis. And my selected results are like this. As they are both global cities, as capital cities, Berlin and Amsterdam have been experiencing similar urbanization process. I could understand how the individual migration background could arrive in one street as businessmen, as also Hall did her research in London case, intermingled with Asian migration background from the post-colonial and the post-war context. And the second, although one has a label of Chinatown and the other doesn't have, both neighborhoods showed a similar density of Asian business. This was the results from the mixture of migration history, urban policy, and planning. And next, I could observe the spatial expansion of ethnic entrepreneurs, such as having several businesses in one street. The ethnic entrepreneurs became a privileged group by using their identity for marketing and business decisions through generations. Last but not least, through acknowledging and understanding the value of ethnic diversity in a neighborhood, we can promote the diversity in our city. For that, we need more continued attentions by understanding the limits and challenges of migration. And thank you for today, and also thank you to Noob's team for giving me this opportunity. You are muted, Professor.
Apologies. I was speaking, but I was muted. Thank you so much, Kim, for your presentation, which brought together the whole theoretical setup of your research. I appreciated that a lot. I think we have much to discuss about because we see very different methodologies here presented within the PhD research. And I think this is part of our NUPS team to discuss how we can understand topics which are relevant for social policies. And here we see very different approaches. Alex was presenting a more quantitative set. Kim was presenting a more literature review and blog approach. And Helmia was having a traditional survey in a way. I'm curious how Domenico does his research. Domenico, please come up with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Would like just to ask you a confirmation if you can see my screen.
You have to go to full screen. Yeah. No. Yeah, that's perfect. Again, full screen, please.
No, that's not working. Sorry for this.
No, we will cut out these problems in our recording. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay, now you should be
That's
able to see
perfect.
full.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone again. Sorry for these small problems, technical problems. By the way, so thank you also the NAPS team to invite me and for organizing this webinar. I am Domenico Bovienzo and I'm a PhD student at Ca' Foscari University in Venice. And I am also part of the RAS division at the Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climate Change, the same in Venice. And today I will present you an analysis based on a composite indicator that we use to analyze two hotspot locations in the African continent. So as you can see from the title of my slides, actually the analysis is try to connect also remote climate impacts with European effects. So there is actually this connection between Europe and remote countries. So the indicator that we use for our analysis that I was telling you before is the informed severity index that you can see here from this picture at the bottom right of this picture, and it is a tool that it was developed by a forum of different international organizations, among which you have UN OCHA, GRC, CMCC, and other international organizations involved in the disaster management, the humanitarian crisis. So among these tools that this informal initiative provides, we use the informed severity that actually is a tool to assess the severity of humanitarian crisis. And I will just give you a few informations about how this tool is composed, but also the way it is structured. So you can see that it has three main components. The tool that we use for our analysis. The first is based on the impact of the crisis. So looking at humanitarian crisis, we take into consideration the impact of the crisis, take into consideration geographical and human aspects, but also the conditions of people affected, so the people in need, the concentration of conditions, and also as part of also this tool, we also model the complexity of the crisis. So we take in consideration aspects related to the society and the safety, but also to the operating environment where the humanitarian crisis is occurring. So after this brief introduction, now I will present you the two storylines that we developed by using this analysis. So as our first hotspot, we took into consideration the tropical cyclone Idai in Mozambique. That was really a really impactful event that occurred in 2019 and triggered large displacements, and in turn also the country required a huge amount of humanitarian aid in order to face this humanitarian situation. And why here I stress the displacement? Because displacement is one of the indicator that is part of the index that is actually changing because of our analysis. So I put really stress on this aspect because displacement is one of the key aspects of our indicator. So we, for this analysis, we modeled the climate aspect of the analysis, and in particular the flood intensity of the tropical cyclone Idai, and we try to also apply socioeconomic but also climate future projections in order to see how the number of displacement might be affected under different climate and socioeconomic scenarios. And you can see, sorry, you can see here the results of our analysis. So, as I was telling to you, we developed different storylines for this particular analysis, and you can see from the top the factual analysis that actually that one that take into consideration the real event of tropical cyclone Idai, and so the number of people affected, but also the number of displacements. And you can see that the severity of the crisis that is measured by our tool, it's around 3 points. So it's actually the severity of the crisis is ranked like a medium severity severe crisis. And as I was telling to you, we also try to model our analysis, building up on this with other storylines. And we actually model the climate and socioeconomic scenarios. In particular, we took into consideration the scenario RCP 8.5, actually the most extreme scenario, where the climate effects are really actually severe for the humanitarian, for the human society. And also at the bottom of the slide, you can see also modeled RCP 2.6 and SSP 1, that are actually those scenarios that foresee a sustainable future. And so, as you can see, also from this slide, the number of displacement changes according to the different scenarios we take into consideration. And also, of course, the severity that we measured, it's also dependent by this scenario. We also modeled the expected humanitarian damages and humanitarian access that would be required by these different scenarios. And so you can see the damage is quite limited in the first part, but after it's going to increase with RCP 8.5, the scenario RCP 8.5 and the SSP 5, and then reduces with the scenario RCP 2.6 and SSP 1 that are actually those foreseeing a sustainable future. Then we also try to apply a similar analysis on the Ethiopian context. Now, Ethiopia, the country, is actually going through a really severe drought. And this drought triggered a lot of food insecurity. And again, the country is requiring a lot of humanitarian aid in order to deal with these problems. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, you see that actually the Horn of Africa and include Ethiopia is under real stress. As you can see here, this yellow color, and now I'm pointing with my pointer, is showing you that really the conditions of the environment is really suffering the high temperatures, and in turn, this one also triggered a lot of food insecurity, and also in turn triggered also new displacements because people are in need of food, and so they are like influenced and they are prone to move more because of the situation. And so what we did here, was to take into consideration all these aspects and try to build up our analysis, including also compounding effects. So we took into consideration the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, and then also the climate change impacts in the future. And we try to model also this aspect. Why we also took into consideration this compound effect, because also Ethiopia is really an importer country in respect to food, and so it's actually really dependent on what are the external shipments of food. And so we found interesting also to play with these kind of effects and factors. And as you can see here, similarly, starting from the situation where there is no drought and going to the situation after the Ukrainian and Russian conflict and with the starting of the drought, you can see that the severity of the crisis is going to increase from 0.2 to 0.3.5, so moving from the medium to high rank severity. And what we did, it was also to as we did before, to model this severity of the crisis according to the different scenarios, including the aspect I was telling to you before. And even here, you can see the humanitarian aid on the right part of the slide that is going to increase according to the future climate scenarios, the most extreme. And then the humanitarian aid required is going to decrease once we consider the most sustainable scenarios, that is the TSS. This TSS scenario, it's actually a scenario that was developed by FAO. And so it's that scenario that foresees agricultural sustainable measures and actions to take place in the future, while instead the scenario RCP 8.5, called also SSS, stands for stratified society scenarios. It's actually that one that foresees climate effects, more extreme climate effects that actually are in turn also exacerbated by low or actually low quality agricultural measures and not so big development of the agricultural sector in the country, so in Ethiopia. Just to conclude, I would like here to leave you with these policy implications of our analysis that we developed, me and my team here at CMCC. And actually what we can get from our analysis is that the large and shared international cooperation is important, is key to deal with future climate events, and at the same time mitigation adaptation efforts in terms of climate measure is key also to face and to decrease the impact and the severity of this crisis. And and also we have to take in mind, and then I would like to conclude that it is also key and central the role of the ODA funders, among which Europe and its member states are one of the key components in actually try to put in place more sustainable development and also mitigation adaptation efforts in remote countries in a way that actually the more involvement and the more funding might also contribute to the actually a more sustainable development of actually remote countries, and this might really help the future humanitarian crisis. With this, I conclude, and I thank you again for your attention, but also the Professor Hillman for her support, and it's fine for me. It's fine. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Domenico. Thank you, all of you.